The cone is an inescapable presence on the University of Warwick campus. For many students, its purpose is inexplicable, yet we cannot imagine our lives at university without it. At 6 metres tall, the cone towers over us, a white spinning frustum that's been here on the outskirts of Coventry almost as long as the university itself. As part of the Raw at 50 project, I got in touch with the creator of the cone, Liliane Lijn, to find out more about the ideas behind it and its many brothers and sisters scattered all over the world. White cone was one of your first outdoor large-scale cones, but you have made a lot of cones since then. Does it still hold a special place in your heart?
Well, I made the white cone in 1971, and yes, it does hold a special place in my heart, and in particular because of the way it has been adopted by the university and the students, in particular the students of the university. And I keep getting people come to see me say, "Oh, I went to Warwick University." In fact, my gallerist, Katie Green, who works in the gallery and who's sort of semi-director of the gallery, she went to Warwick University, and so she said, I kind of grew up with your cone. So that's one reason why it's very close to my heart. Because, public sculpture is very difficult. Public sculpture has a very difficult life on the whole. And very often it is not valued and either not maintained or decays, or people don't care about it, or they disfigure it, or there are many, many ways in which public sculpture kind of has a sad fate. And so it's a wonderful thing when you know that a work of yours is loved by people, enjoyed by people. That's really important.
I knew that Liliane had seen some of the culture around the cone, but I thought I'd got something that she hadn't seen before. I'd found pictures of a student dressed up as the cone, and I wanted to see what she thought of it. I had a picture I was going to try and show you. A while back, someone made a costume with the cone.
Oh, wow. Yes, that's very nice. Was it actually electric?
Yeah, I think they used lights on it.
Lovely. They used some kind of neon.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's lovely. That's really, hold on a second, I'm going to photograph it. It's really nice.
I think it's safe to say Liliane was a fan of the costume. Having grown up in North America, Liliane's family moved to Europe when she was a teenager. She left school early so she could move to Paris and focus on her life as an artist. She studied archaeology and art history, and in these crucial first years in France, she would uncover the influences that thread through her work even today, including beat poetry and science. I wanted to know more about the poem machines Liliane began to make around this time, and how they came about.
That's quite complex. Now, I was living in Paris at the time, 1962, and I think it was towards the end of 62, and it was a mixture. I mean, my poem machine started off with something I called vibrograph. So that means a sort of a vibrating word, a vibrating letter, a graph, a vibrating graphic, or a vibrating letter, and that was inspired, or I was inspired by a visit to the Science Museum, where I saw an experiment in diffraction, in light diffraction, and I tried to make something based on that experiment. and it was two drums with lines, parallel lines of different thicknesses, black and white, that when they rotated at a certain speed, the two drums, they were horizontal, right? Like horizontal cylinders rotating in a frame, in a box. And when they rotated, they vibrated, and also there was a kind of color. You could see color coming out of it. So what you had was diffraction, right? A kind of, it behaved like a very coarse diffraction grating. And although I didn't know that at the time, I thought it was really exciting. And from that, I thought I had this idea that words are made out of letters and letters are made out of lines. And so I thought, well, perhaps I can vibrate words and I will have the vibration, but at the same time, I'll have the content, the meaning. Now, yes, I was friends with a number of beat poets, people like Gregory Corso and Sigler Bayless, Brian Geisen, William Burroughs. I knew them. They were all living at the Beat Hotel in Paris, and I was living around the corner at the time. And so we became friendly. And I knew about cut-ups. I'd read cut-ups, and I was interested in it. So there was obviously a merger there of the ideas of cut-ups and the idea that I had that came from science and diffraction. And I think the two kind of merged together. And from that, I created poem machines, which I like. I like the idea of calling them machines and putting the two words together, poetry and machines, because it was a little bit shocking in some ways. And it was the idea of breaking the elitism, if you like, of poetry. I mean, I love poetry, so it's not that I don't like poetry. I love poetry. But I think there was a certain elitism in it. And so you have, there's a kind of contradiction there, because actually I really don't like, I'm not a great fan of sort of dumbed down poetry, what I would call dumbed down poetry. But at the same time, I don't feel that there needs to be a pretense. You know, that it's hard to explain that. In other words, I don't believe in dumbing down art so that everybody can understand it. I think everybody will understand something and will glean something from a work, whatever that work is, if it is intrinsic and part of the expression of the artist or the poet. I don't think it needs to be dumbed down for an audience.
How about, because the idea of the cone with a K, that's kind of poetic in itself. How did you come to that?
Well, it's two things. I mean, the idea of koans is a Japanese word that is a riddle that was given to, koans were riddles that were given to monks as an aid to meditation. And they were always paradoxical, if you like, paradoxical phrases, like what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or, I mean, some of them are quite long. But does Buddha have Buddha nature? That sort of thing. And the idea of the riddle and the idea of punning the word cone with koan were two things that I liked. And I felt that the works that I did, the koans, were in a sense aids to meditation. That if you looked at them long enough, you could empty your mind of thought and just focus. Meditation is really about focusing. So focusing on your breath or focusing on anything, and somehow not being, not necessarily not having other thoughts, but those thoughts drifting away until you're just focusing on that one thing.
It's just so weird hearing you saying that because when like you've done some films of the cones spinning and so on, and they do sort of make you zone out almost and like really focus, but you don't know what you're focusing on.
Yeah, well,
Um,
zoning out in a sense is what, in a sense, I think meditation is a kind of zoning out, because you're just sort of there and aware, but not full of all kinds of thoughts, And it's very difficult to do, really. If you try to do it, it's difficult. But sometimes you can do it without trying, just by somehow being absorbed by something. And that's, in a sense, what these sculptures were about on one level. I mean, they weren't entirely about that. There are other aspects to them. So the Koan, there's the cone in itself, which is a geometric form, and I've worked with all geometric forms more or less. But I've worked with them in a way that isn't purely geometric. So, but I've taken them as my base. I've started off with geometry. And the cone I've kind of become, I've worked more with the cone almost than any other, although I've worked a lot with the triangle and the prism, which is much more complex form. But the cone, the reason I've worked with the cone is that it is a ubiquitous form. It is present almost everywhere. So starting from your eye, right? The part of your eye that actually allows you to see color, to differentiate colors, is a cone. And something as banal, let's say, as the cones on the highway, which are signals, right? Or the space at the Earth's poles. There's a space in the magnetic field where cosmic particles get lost, and that is called the lost cone. So, I mean, practically all religious forms like stupas and steeples are all conical, because it refers to the sacred mountain, to the idea also of going, this going upward. But I think of it more as going out instead of going upward, because the cone is also the perfect shape of emission. In other words, all radiation, energy, all spreads out from a point, the point at which it starts, and then it goes out, like, let's say, exploding nova. Or gravitational waves, for that matter.
I couldn't wrap my head around what appeared to me to be cold, hard, unobjective science being mixed up with such a rich and historic topic as religion to be used as a springboard for creativity. I wanted to see it as Liliane saw it.
Well, science is knowledge. Science isn't science. Science is nature. It's the world. It's cosmos. It's what we are. What we're part of. And science investigates that. And so that's why I'm interested in science, because I'm interested in, who I am and where I am, what I am, and what other things are around me. But, religion, I'm not particularly interested in religion. I'm interested in mythology. And I'm interested I was for a long time interested in Buddhism. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not interested in Buddhism, but I'm not interested in it as a religion, as a religious follower. I mean, and I don't even consider it a religion. Buddhism is a kind of psychological philosophy, if you like, and a way of life. It's not a religion with popes and churches, although it has monasteries. That's part of it, but it isn't the most interesting part.
Indeed, far from the static art you might see in any church or temple, Liliane's work appears to be literally alive. It's no wonder the Warwick cone has developed its own persona. Even Liliane's two-dimensional, immobile art seems to me to be imbued with a sense of life. Before we started our interview, I was excited to see that Liliane's room was full of her art, including cone cuts, a set of silk-screened, cut-out and collaged prints, depicting cones similar to the one at Warwick, except for that they are cut up into 4 or 5 sections, spinning in opposite directions, so that the cones appear to bend and dance. How about the way the cones, like when you showed me the cone cuts on your wall, they almost seem, the way they bend over, it seems like they're interacting with each other. Do you see them as having like some kind of character or personality?
Well, yes, in a way, I suppose I do. I mean, uh, I kind of, I mean, really, in the cone cuts on the wall, I mean, these prints I made, there, it's really about space and color and form, and so taking a cone and dissecting it, and then trying to look not only at the outside of it but also the inside of it in 2 dimensions. So I was interested in the relationship between 3 and 2 dimensions. So the idea of moving between dimensions in space interested me in these prints. And so they look like they're dancing and they're interconnecting and well, they are. I mean, yes. I like to think that what I make comes alive. I think that's one of the most important aspects of a work of art, is for it to actually have a life of its own.
In your films, you also include the sound of the cones as they spin. I think there's ones where you can see the cones just spinning around, and then like the machines whirring. And there's always, because I think when the students on campus see the cone, they also think of the sound that it makes. And like that clunkiness, was that intentional at the start?
Yeah, well, I mean, the sound is part of it, and I've always felt the sound was part of it. And when I first made them, I would be told by um, galleries and art critics, people would say to me, "Oh, but they're noisy," and that's their life. I think to start with, I was a bit upset about it, because when you make something and that's an intrinsic part of it, you try. If people don't like it and don't want to live with it, you try to sort of muffle it. You make it, like you do. Be quiet. It's your children. Be quiet. Don't make noise. But actually, the noise is their life, and so it's part of them. And I think the best thing is to accept it and enjoy it.
Of all Liliane's work, the sculpture that has surely been enjoyed the most is Star Slide. Designed and built for the Evelina Children's Hospital in 2005, Starslide is a 5-metre high, fantastic multicoloured indoor helter-skelter slide in the form of a cone. Did you get to see it being used for the first time by the children?
Oh, I've seen it used many times, actually. I actually, two of the most fun times was once when I was with a friend who deals in artist books. I was with this friend passing by in a car, and I said, "Well, do you want to see a big work of mine?" He said, "Yes." So I said, "Well, let's go into the hospital and I'll show it to you." And it was evening, so I didn't think there'd be anybody there. But in fact, there were a few children playing on it, And we looked at it, and he went up to them and said, "This is the person who made this cone, who designed this cone." And they just came up to me and started hugging me. And it was so sweet, and they're saying, "Oh, this is the best thing. We love you. We love you." It was so funny, and so sweet, Yeah, I've enjoyed it. And then I took my grandchildren there, and we couldn't get them away. They didn't want to stop. So it was fun. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worked very well, that piece. I mean, I'm not, I don't go there now, so I don't know what its destiny is, but I hope they're looking after it. Yeah.
Have you tried going on it yourself?
Yes, of course, we all went. Even the person who made it, Peter Waldy, who was this amazing craftsman and a big, big man, really quite a heavy man. And he said, well, I thought I'd try it out to see if it's sturdy enough. And it was,
More recently, you've made a handkerchief design to raise funds for COVID, I saw. Could you tell me how it came about?
It came about because a German dealer and art gallerist, actually she makes editions. She works with artists to make editions. Danielle Jurgens, her name is. And she asked me and a number of other artists, there were quite a few artists, who she asked to make this edition, a very small edition, only 3 of these hankies that you could then fold up and make into a mask. And I put words on mine. So I put the words from my card game, Power Game, on the mask.
How did you choose the words when you made the card game?
They're random. I didn't choose them. I just, I had a deck of blank cards on the table, and then I just wrote words, just any word that came to my head. I wrote it down really as quickly as possible. And that way, doing it as quickly as possible made it quite random, really. I didn't think about whether I had too many of this or not enough of that, I just wrote them all down and then turned it over and did it again. Kept going, so that I didn't know what word was on the back of the words. In other words, I did a whole one side of each card to start with, and just laid them down with the blank side uppermost, then wrote words again on the blank side without looking what the word was on the other side. So that made not only the words random, but the actual connection between the 2 words.
Last year, you made the Converse column for Leeds University, and has that got words written by the students on it?
Well, what I did was this. I mean, it's really a cut up. So what I did was I asked for contributions from the students, and there was certainly a kind of discussion about this between the people who, the people at the university, the head librarian, the head of English, a number of people there, and the commissioner who had commissioned it, and that was a more commercial company. And so they expressed certain interests, which were okay. I mean, their interests were in innovation, education, knowledge. Those were the words that they were interested in. And so I actually asked people to send me anything they liked, a very short, 140 character, like a tweet, contribution relating to some of these subjects, including energy, innovation, knowledge, nature, whatever, or anything that they felt like sending. And I got about 60 or 70, not very many really, considering how many people go to that university. So I got about, but luckily, because otherwise it would have just made my task much heavier, much harder. And so I went through these, picked out the ones I liked most, and then I put my own contribution in. I wrote a text, and then I cut the whole thing up until I liked it, until I felt it worked. And it's strange with putting words on a column like that, because they have to fit into the actual lines. And there are just so many words you can put on a line. And so you have to cut words sometimes, or add. it's not, you have to, so in other words, the content has to fit the structure. And so sometimes meaning changes because of the way it's put onto the structure. And I think that's quite interesting too. And so there are two layers in this sculpture. And there are two drums, one inside the other, that are rotating in different directions and at slightly different speeds. And there are words on each of them, and each of them are lit. So each drum, one drum is lit from the inside going out. And then between the two drums, we're lighting the surface of the inside drum to give it different colors. That was the idea. Instead of painting, let's say, the inside drum red and the outside drum black or blue, it's blue. What we've done is the outside drum is blue, but the inside drum is white, and it's lit with LEDs so that it changes color, which was an interesting experiment. I'd never done that before.
Am I allowed to ask which is your favorite out of the work that you've done for Leeds or the work that is now at Warwick? Should we be jealous of it?
Oh, no, I don't have favorites. That's like asking a mother who their favorite child is. No, I like them both. They're so different anyway. I mean, the Warwick Koan is a completely different work to the Leeds sculpture. You know, one has language. You know, one is in a sense speaking with language, and the other one speaking with the light, just light and line and movement. So they're different. I wouldn't sort of decide between them, but I am very glad that the Warwick Koan is, you know, making people happy. People are enjoying it. And I like the cartoons, by the way. I mean, I love the idea that, you know, that the Koan is, so I have read tweets or on Facebook messages where they were saying that the Koan, you have to sort of go and worship the Koan, and the Koan is sort of the mummy Koan, and then there are baby Koans in other places, and I thought that was all very funny and amusing and humorous and alive, really. Yeah. It's the way art should be. It's the way art should work with people. It's the kind of interaction that I feel that an artist is lucky to have with the public.